The woman sitting alone by the cafe window had already checked the time 6 times when she finally decided to leave. The sunlight was still bright outside. Cars moved slowly through the busy afternoon street, and around her, couples laughed over coffee while she sat across from an empty chair. She had been told he was kind, responsible, and different from the men she had met before. But now, after 45 minutes, she felt foolish for believing it. Then the cafe door opened, and a tired-looking man rushed inside, holding the hand of an elderly woman who walked carefully with a small cane. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his hair was messy, and his face carried the unmistakable exhaustion of someone who had been running against time. He looked toward the woman by the window, took a breath, and hurried over. He was late, but the reason he had brought his elderly mother would soon change everything she believed about love. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, patience, and second chances can change someone's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Life Spark Stories. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this one. Her name was Maren, a quiet elementary school art teacher who had spent the last 2 years avoiding blind dates. She had agreed to this one only because her closest friend insisted that she stop judging every new person by the disappointments of the past. She had imagined meeting a confident man, sharing coffee, laughing about awkward first date stories, and perhaps discovering something unexpected. Instead, she found herself staring at a man named Soren, who looked as though he had just survived the hardest hour of his life. Beside him stood his mother, Odette, a 78-year-old woman with silver hair, a pale blue cardigan, and gentle eyes that seemed to carry decades of memories. Soren apologized repeatedly, explaining that his mother had fallen while getting ready to leave home, and he could not bring himself to leave her alone. Maren could have walked away. In fact, every part of her told her she should. But when Odette quietly apologized for ruining their first meeting, Maren noticed something in Soren's expression. It was not embarrassment. It was love mixed with fear. They sat together at the small table, and the afternoon began differently than either of them expected. Soren ordered tea for his mother before looking at the menu for himself. He checked whether her hands were warm, adjusted the cushion behind her back, and made sure she had everything she needed. Maren watched without saying much. She had spent years hearing people talk about love as flowers, expensive dinners, weekend trips, and romantic surprises. Yet here was a man whose idea of love seemed to be remembering whether his mother needed sugar in her tea. When Odette smiled and told Maren that Soren had been taking care of her alone since his father died, Maren finally understood why he had arrived late. He had not been careless with her time. He had simply been trying to be in two places at once. As the afternoon continued, something unexpected happened. Odette began telling stories about Soren as a little boy. She described how he used to bring injured birds home, how he once gave away his new winter coat to another child at school, and how he had always been incapable of walking away from someone who needed help. Soren became embarrassed, but Maren laughed. For the first time that day, the tension disappeared. Then Odette suddenly became quiet. She looked at Maren and admitted that she had been afraid Soren would never allow anyone into his life because he was always busy taking care of everyone else. Maren glanced at Soren, and their eyes met. There was no dramatic music, no perfect romantic moment, just two strangers realizing that perhaps they had both been searching for something neither knew how to describe. When the cafe began filling with evening customers, Soren quietly offered to take his mother home. He assumed the date had been a disaster. He apologized again, telling Maren that she deserved someone who could arrive on time and give her his full attention. Maren looked at him for several seconds before smiling. She told him that he had actually given her something more valuable than his full attention. He had shown her what kind of man he was when life became inconvenient. Soren seemed unable to respond. Odette simply smiled from beside him. But the real surprise came the following week. Maren received a message from Soren asking if she would meet him again. This time, he promised he would arrive early. When they met, Odette was not with him. Yet instead of feeling relieved, Maren found herself wondering where the elderly woman was. Soren explained that a neighbor had agreed to stay with his mother for a few hours. Then he handed Maren a small envelope. Inside was a simple handwritten note from Odette thanking her for treating an old woman like a person instead of an inconvenience. Maren's eyes filled with tears. Months passed and their relationship grew slowly. There were no perfect days. Some dates were canceled because Odette needed help. Some weekends were spent at the hospital. Some evenings ended early because Soren was exhausted. But Maren stayed. She learned that real love was not always candlelight and roses. Sometimes it was carrying groceries upstairs. Sometimes it was sitting quietly in a hospital corridor. Sometimes it was making tea at 3 in the afternoon, while someone you loved slept in the next room. And sometimes, love was simply giving a person another chance after they arrived late. One bright afternoon, Maren and Soren sat together in the same café where they had first met. Odette was sitting nearby, watching them with a peaceful smile. Soren reached across the table and took Maren's hand. He told her that he had expected his first blind date to end in embarrassment, but instead it had become the beginning of the greatest chapter of his life. Maren looked at Odette, then back at him, and smiled through tears. She realized that the man who had arrived late had actually arrived at exactly the right moment. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and leave a comment telling us whether you would have stayed or walked away from that first date. Your engagement means more than you know and helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before we end, please comment, second chances, if you believe that sometimes the most beautiful people enter our lives through the moments that don't go according to plan.